Picture this. Tyler has just moved to London for work. His new British colleague, Sophie, finishes reading his first project proposal. She smiles warmly and says, "That's quite interesting. I'll certainly bear it in mind." Tyler walks away feeling great. She liked it. She's going to use his ideas. Except she didn't like it, and she is never going to think about it again. In British English, "That's quite interesting" often means, "I think that's nonsense." And "I'll bear it in mind" is one of the most polite ways to say, "I've already forgotten what you said." Tyler has no idea he's just been rejected, and Sophie has no idea she's just been rude. This is the hidden world of British communication, and for Americans, it is an absolute minefield. British people are famous for being polite. They queue without complaining, they apologize when someone else steps on their foot, they say lovely about things that are clearly not lovely. But here is the twist that nobody talks about. For Americans, that famous British politeness is not polite at all. It is confusing, dishonest, and sometimes genuinely hurtful. These are 7 things British people do that Americans find rude, and more importantly, the psychology that explains why both sides think they are right. The first one is the thing that causes more confusion between Americans and British people than anything else: the indirect no. In America, if someone asks you to do something and you cannot do it, you say no. You might soften it. You might say, "I appreciate the offer, but I can't," but the word no is in there somewhere. In Britain, the word no barely exists in polite conversation. Instead, British people have created an entire language of refusal that never actually uses the word. "I would love to, but I'm not sure I can." That means no. "That could be tricky." That means no. "Let me get back to you on that." That often means no, too. Sophie is not trying to be deceptive. In British culture, a direct no feels aggressive. It feels like you're attacking the other person's idea or request. So British people wrap their refusals in so many layers of softening language that the actual message gets buried. The psychology behind this comes from what researchers call politeness theory, developed by Penelope and Stephen Levinson. They found that every culture develops strategies to protect what they called face, which is a person's public self-image, but different cultures protect different types of face. Americans tend to protect what is called positive face, the desire to be liked and appreciated. So Americans are warm, complimentary, and direct because directness signals that you respect someone enough to be honest with them. British people tend to protect what is called negative face, the desire not to be imposed upon. So British communication is designed to give people an easy way out. The problem is that when you give someone an exit that is too subtle, Americans walk right past it without noticing. Here's one that baffles Americans. You're having a conversation with a British person and suddenly they go quiet. Not awkward quiet, just quiet. An American in that situation thinks something has gone wrong. Did I say something offensive? Are they upset? Is the conversation over? But in British culture, silence is not empty, it's full. British people use silence the way Americans use words to communicate comfort, disapproval, or the need to think. When Sophie goes quiet during a conversation, she might be processing. She might be disagreeing but choosing not to say so. Or she might simply be comfortable enough to not fill every second with sound. Americans tend to be low-context communicators. This is a concept from anthropologist Edward Hall. In low-context cultures like America, meaning lives in the words themselves. If you want someone to know something, you say it. But Britain, even though it's also classified as low context overall, has a much stronger high context layer in its social communication. Meaning lives between the words, in the pauses, in what's not said. And this creates a fascinating clash. Americans hear silence and think something is missing. British people hear constant talking and think something is wrong. Tyler tells Sophie that her presentation was amazing. Sophie responds with, "Oh, it was nothing really, I just threw it together." Tyler is confused.
Was she fishing for more compliments? Is she being falsely modest? Does she genuinely not care about his opinion? None of the above. She is following one of the deepest unwritten rules in British culture. Never accept a compliment directly. In America, the standard response to a compliment is thank you. Sometimes thank you so much. It's simple, direct, and positive. Americans see accepting a compliment as gracious. In Britain, accepting a compliment directly feels dangerously close to arrogance. The British cultural reflex is to deflect, minimize, or redirect. Oh, this old thing when someone compliments your outfit. I got lucky really when someone praises your work. It was a team effort when you clearly did it yourself. This connects to what Geert Hofstede identified as the difference in how cultures handle self-promotion. Americans score the highest in the world on individualism. Personal achievement is celebrated openly. Telling people you're good at something is seen as confidence. In Britain, also scores high on individualism, but it layers on something called Tau poppy syndrome, the cultural instinct to cut down anyone who rises too visibly above the group. So British people learn to downplay their successes, not because they lack confidence, but because visible confidence invites social punishment. For Americans, this looks like dishonesty. If your presentation was great, why would you pretend it wasn't? Every American who has spent time around British people has experienced this moment. Sophie says something that sounds like an insult. Tyler freezes. Was she joking? Was she serious? Is he supposed to laugh? British sarcasm operates on completely different rules than American sarcasm. In America, sarcasm is usually signaled clearly. There's a tone shift, an eye roll, a pause that the listener tells, I am being sarcastic right now. American sarcasm is like a neon sign. You can see it coming. British sarcasm is delivered completely deadpan. The tone doesn't change, the facial expression doesn't change, the words sound like they could be entirely sincere, and that's the whole point.
Quite interesting. These phrases cause an absolute minefield when Americans move to London, and because of how subtle they are, the inevitable miscommunications happen for months before anyone realizes what's actually happening. Number 1. Deflecting compliments. First off, the most obvious one, never accept a compliment directly. If an American says, your music is great, you say, thank you, I appreciate that. If you say that to a British person, they respond with, oh, this was terrible. I completely screwed up the beginning. This is a national trait and no one can seem to explain it why. Number 2, deadpan. Being completely deadpan. This is where it starts to get dangerous for Americans. When Tyler, a boss, tells a staff member that their project is completely useless, they are actually just joking. This leaves the American intern quite puzzled as his staff member completely laughs it off and still settles for a free coffee instead. This kind of humor can be quite sophisticated and initially can be really hard to get used to. The use of sarcasm is equally dishonest. Americans say the exact opposite answers. In British humor, the skill is in the delivery being indistinguishable from a real statement. The listener has to figure out whether it is a joke based on context, shared knowledge, and the absurdity of the statement itself. For Americans, this is not funny. It is stressful, because if you laugh and they were serious, you look heartless, and if you take it seriously and they were joking, you look like you cannot take a joke. British sarcasm evolved as a social survival mechanism. In a culture where direct criticism is taboo, sarcasm became the back door. You can say what you really think as long as there's plausible deniability that you were only joking. Number 3. Quite. This is one of the most dangerous words in British English for Americans. In American English, quite is an amplifier. That was quite good means it was very good. She's quite talented means she's impressively talented. In British English, quite is often a softener. That was quite good means it was acceptable but not impressive. She's quite talented means she has some ability but nothing extraordinary. So when Sophie tells Tyler his work is quite good, he hears praise. She is actually delivering a lukewarm assessment. This single word has probably caused more transatlantic workplace misunderstandings than any other, and neither side realizes the miscommunication has happened because both are hearing exactly what they expect to hear. Now, here is what most Americans never realize. They do the exact same thing to British people, just in the opposite direction. Every one of these British habits that frustrates Americans has an American equivalent that drives British people mad. British people are too indirect. Americans are so direct that it feels like an attack. An American boss saying, "That doesn't work, redo it," is efficient communication in New York. In London, it sounds like a personal insult. British people deflect compliments. Americans inflate them so much they lose all meaning. When everything is amazing and awesome and the best ever, British people stop trusting any of it. If everything is special, nothing is. British sarcasm is too subtle. American sincerity is so aggressive that British people don't know where to look. An American saying, "I love your energy, you are so great to be around," to someone they met 10 minutes ago feels deeply suspicious to a British person. The psychology here is symmetrical. Both cultures have communication systems that feel natural on the inside and bizarre on the outside, and both cultures are completely convinced that their way is normal and the other way is weird. There is an entire translation guide that circulates online between British English and what it actually means, and it is painfully accurate. When a British person says, "with all due respect," they mean, "I think you are wrong." When they say, "I hear what you say," they mean, "I disagree and I do not want to discuss this further." When they say, "That is a very brave decision," they mean, "You are making a terrible mistake." Americans hear these phrases and take them at face value. They think they have just been shown respect, been listened to, and been called courageous. This is not a quirk. It's an entire communication system built on what linguists call pragmatic implicature, where the real meaning is not in the words themselves, but in the social context surrounding them. British people learn this system from childhood. Americans never had a reason to learn it. And so every conversation becomes a translation exercise, where one person is speaking in code and the other does not know the code exists. The last one cuts the deepest. Americans value emotional openness. Sharing how you feel, being vulnerable, expressing enthusiasm or sadness or frustration, these are seen as signs of authenticity in American culture. British people often experience this openness as uncomfortable, overwhelming, or even inappropriate. And in return, they offer a level of emotional reserve that Americans interpret as coldness, disinterest, or lack of caring. Tyler shares that he's going through a tough time. Sophie says, "Oh dear, that doesn't sound great. Shall I put the kettle on?" Tyler wanted empathy. Sophie is offering empathy, but they are speaking completely different emotional languages. Tyler wants to hear, "I'm so sorry, that must be really hard for you." Sophie is showing she cares by offering practical comfort rather than emotional words. Neither of them is doing anything wrong, but both of them feel like the other person missed the point. Here is what nobody ever talks about. Both cultures are equally dishonest. They just lie about different things. Americans perform emotional enthusiasm they don't always feel. The "how are you, I'm great" exchange that happens 100 times a day, even when nobody is great. The workplace compliments that everyone knows are inflated. The positivity that is mandatory even when things are falling apart. British people perform emotional reserve they don't always feel. The "I'm fine" that means I'm absolutely not fine. The understatement that hides genuine passion. The politeness that masks real frustration. Americans protect self-image. They build a culture where everyone is encouraged to feel good about themselves, even when reality tells a different story. British people protect social harmony. They build a culture where nobody is made uncomfortable, even when honesty would serve everyone better. Neither system is more honest, neither system is more rude. They are mirror images of each other, both designed to navigate the same human problem. How do you live in a society with other people without constantly offending them? They just came up with opposite answers. So, here's the question. Which version of polite is actually ruder? The American version, where people tell you what they think but inflate it with forced enthusiasm, or the British version, where people protect your feelings but hide what they actually mean? Drop your answer in the comments, and if you haven't seen the other side of this, watch 5 Things Americans Do That British People Find Rude right here. It'll completely change how you see this debate. And if you want more breakdowns of the psychology behind the US and UK culture clash, hit subscribe. We post new videos every week.